Deux choses, s'il vous plaît. D'abord, en posant des questions, il n'y a pas d'intervention du podium. Vous avez tout entendu au cours de la présentation, la cérémonie. Donc, nous allons passer directement aux questions. Je vous demande deux choses. D'abord, de vous identifier, de quel média vous êtes ou de quel journal, quel titre. Et deuxième chose, cette conférence de presse est sur le lancement du rapport de la Commission ouest-africaine sur le drogue. Donc, vos questions devraient être adressées au rapport et aux présentations. Je sais que membres de notre groupe ici sur le podium ont un plus grand intérêt, mais aujourd'hui, c'est la thématique de la drogue en Afrique de l'Ouest est plus large. Donc, restons sur ce sujet, s'il vous plaît. Sinon, je serai obligé.
On parle de décriminalisation dans le rapport. Or, en français, je sais que ça marche bien en anglais, mais en français, il y a une différence entre dépénaliser et décriminaliser. C'est pas du tout la même chose. Décriminaliser, ça veut dire que avoir de la drogue ou faire commerce de la drogue n'est plus un crime, donc ne tombe plus sous le coup des conventions internationales. Dépénaliser, ça veut dire que quelqu'un qui est trouvé avec de la drogue sur lui, si c'est pour sa consommation personnelle, n'ira pas en prison, ce qui permet d'alléger bien sûr tout le circuit pénal. Donc, or le terme qui est utilisé dans le rapport, dans les deux, en anglais et en français, c'est décriminaliser. Donc j'aimerais avoir une explication un petit peu plus approfondie là-dessus, parce que ça pose beaucoup de problèmes. Et juste, je profite de l'aubaine, après je passerai le micro, c'est à la suite de ce rapport, est-ce qu'on peut s'attendre à ce qu'il y ait davantage de centres de désintoxication, de réhabilitation pour les drogués qui soient créés en Afrique et où?
Merci. Je vais peut-être demander, sans entrer dans les sémantiques de la langage, peut-être demander à le président Obasanjo de vous porter un certain éclaircissement à ce propos.
Well, Alan, maybe you'll have done better to ask somebody who can understand both English and French to answer, because I don't. What we are saying is that a young man who comes from a broken home, probably he had or doesn't know a father, or probably a mother who, if he went to school at all, dropped out in the early primary school, early secondary school, or at the end of primary school, who has no job, and who wallows in poverty, and who, through peer relationship, slipped into drug, and you take him and you put him in jail. Now, whatever makes that happen, we say needs to be looked at again. Now, if that is decriminalization or depenalization, well, let us get it, the word that is appropriate, whether it's in English or in French. But for us as a commission, we say the big baron, who, because for, if you can get 1 kilogram of cocaine from Central America across West Africa into Europe, he will get millions of dollars. And who could influence a political actor in any of our countries, or the judiciary, or the police, or the military? That man must not get away from the rigors of the law. In fact, we should make the law strong for such a person and those who are accomplices. Now, if that means recriminalization or repenalization of such people, please let it be. But as I said, I won't know the difference, but I hope what I have explained puts you clear in what the Commission is saying, maybe no matter what the word in French or in English.
Mr. Annan.
Je crois que en anglais, decriminalisation, vous n'aurez pas posé cette question. C'est ça. Oui, oui.
Could I suggest?
My name is Eno Andre from the BBC, and my question is looking at what Mr. Annan said about drug money financing some extremist groups. We know two main groups in the region, at least one in Nigeria, Boko Haram, and groups in northern Nigeria. Have you found any link between drug trafficking and the financing of those groups? Thank you.
Yes, we'll take 2 more questions, please, before we respond. Gentleman, lady on my...
Journaliste à la RFM. Je voudrais juste savoir, dans votre rapport, est-ce que vous avez pu soulever le fait que la menace terroriste est amplifiée aujourd'hui par le trafic de drogue? Tout à l'heure, vous l'avez dit, l'Afrique n'est pas la plus... l'Afrique de l'Ouest, la région de l'Afrique de l'Ouest n'est pas le plus grand consommateur. Mais aujourd'hui, qui profite de la drogue? Le terrorisme ou bien c'est les narcotrafiquants?
Thank you. A third question. Yes, the gentleman over here, and then I'll...
Je suis Amadou Saliftal, journaliste à la radio Sud FM à Dakar. Ma question est pour Monsieur le secrétaire général Kofi Annan. Dans les quartiers, on voit souvent qu'il y a des associations qui essaient de se battre, mais avec des difficultés énormes. Dans la banlieue de Dakar, il y a par exemple le centre Jacques Chirac, qui existe depuis 20 ans, mais qui est pratiquement dans de sérieuses difficultés, alors qu'on sait que c'est une zone très difficile. Qu'est-ce que vous comptez faire réellement à la base, pour ces organisations qui essaient de se battre contre la drogue?
Est-ce que je peux vous demander de répéter la question parce que je peux bien saisir?
Ah, d'accord. Donc, ma question est relative donc, aux organisations à la base, dans les quartiers, qui essaient de se battre contre le trafic de drogue. Ces organisations n'ont pas assez de moyens. Ils ont beaucoup de difficultés pour faire face aux jeunes, aux trafiquants d'abord, et pour récupérer les jeunes. On a l'exemple du centre Jacques Chirac de Thiaroye, qui est là depuis 20 ans, mais qui se meut dans de très très grandes difficultés. Qu'est-ce que votre fondation prévoit pour ces organisations?
Merci bien. Donc, je pense qu'il y a 3 questions du fond. D'abord, qui sont les principaux bénéficiaires du trafic de drogue, si j'ai bien compris. Deuxièmement, les liens entre le trafic de drogue et le terrorisme, l'extrémisme, le radicalisme. Et troisièmement, la question qui vient d'être posée, à savoir comment on puisse aider les organisations de la société civile qui travaillent à la base dans le domaine de traitement, la prévention, qui sont quand même démunies de moyens. Qu'est-ce que la Commission prévoit?
What does the Commission advocate on those subjects? These are the 3 questions. President Obasanjo will start, then I shall ask the other members to kindly.
That the young man who asked that question, the first question of drug trafficking and its effect or its implication for terrorism, I think the same man talked to me earlier on this morning. And what I did say at that time is that there are 5 things that feed on themselves. 1, drug trafficking. 2, human trafficking. You cannot completely remove it. 3, money laundering. 4, gun or arms trafficking. And of course, consequently, terrorism. Now, our commission has not gone into detailed study and finding and saying, look, where exactly and how exactly does any terrorist organization in West Africa get its money. But there is no doubt from empirical evidence that these 5 are somehow interconnected.
And let me add that if I may ask you to leave your microphones where they are, don't keep coming back and forth, so they're going to stay here. Let me say that I made that statement, and I think from what the President has said, it is obvious that it is opportunistic. When you have this sort of criminal activity taking place in the region, criminal elements will get involved, and terrorists may also find it opportunistic to link up with them, particularly when you consider the routes taken to send these drugs to Europe or to America. They go through the Sahel, they go by plane, and they go by sea, and also across to the US. And so it offers quite a lot of opportunities for link up, and I think this is what President Obasanjo tried to explain to you. And I think in a way that deals also with the question the lady to the right asked. It was the same sort of question. On the question of how you get resources to help the young people whom you want to take off drugs, whom you want to deal with humanely, I recognize there is a problem in the region, and health services don't pay too much attention to this issue. And we need to find a way of strengthening the health services and finding the resources to help. And you will notice this morning in my statement, I said the resources and the help we are getting from our international partners should not only go to interdiction, but it should also be used for prevention and health and others. So that will be one of the answers. And governments should also offer more resources for the program. Good.
Je me demande si soit le président Pérez ou Nkojo voudrait répondre.
Edem Kojo would like to answer this question, particularly the linkage of the extremist groups. And could you kindly respond? President Pires. The report, the relationship is quite, the report is rather nuanced with respect to that linkage between the funding of terrorism through narco-traffickers. But from my own vantage point, terrorism is a phenomenon that goes by far beyond drug trafficking. Hence, terrorism is a matter of security, first and foremost. The debate ought to be done in a major conference on security in Africa. And I believe the challenge is indeed at stake, taking account of what obtains in West Africa and elsewhere, to delineate the best policies or the best policies, and also the right cooperation we ought to establish between African states in order to cope with terrorism. You've alluded to the funding of terrorism. Here too, things are a lot more complex. We don't know who funds terrorism. Terrorism is much older than this issue of the intensification of drug trafficking and transiting via West Africa. I therefore believe that's another question, another issue which we must hammer out in another framework. But from my own vantage point, there are 2 or 3 questions that should be put by changing one's approach. First of all, what would be the input of social communication in this fight we are waging against drug consumption and narco-trafficking. We clearly need your support. You can be a major stakeholder in that fight. Now, the second question, what would be the role of the citizen in each one of us in our countries, either against narco-trafficking or against drug consumption, and clearly for the management of the drug addicts? And thirdly, what would be the role of our societies? I believe we are not only demanding from the states to do such or such thing. We must wage a fight. We must have an overall front collectively, either societies, the citizens, the states, and the public authorities. I thank you. In Central America.
Issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, in Latin America, we have a situation where drug traffickers are very much linked with some of the groups that are fighting against the Colombian government. And this has produced a long-term war, which is one of the problems of having those links. Definitely, those links are opportunistic, as has been mentioned. It's not based on clear same ideas or ideology. They are based on common grounds of benefiting economically. And at the end of the day, they create even conflicts among them, because some of the groups become drug traffickers themselves for their own purposes. But I think what is important is that the state treats the threat of drugs as a global problem that involves security measures, but also, as I was describing, socioeconomic and other dimensions, public health issues. Whereas the issue of trafficking drugs through illegal groups, armed groups, is a bit different. It has to be seen from a national security point of view, as mentioned by Mr. Renan. The question is when that link becomes strong. And it becomes strong when organized groups, organized criminal groups are very strong, are large, okay? So one of the major purposes of the states is to dismantle large organizations, even though we cannot stop the drug trafficking itself. But if drug trafficking is done by smaller organizations, the linkage between them and the terrorists is not as dangerous as when it is large criminal organizations. And the lesson in Colombia is very clear. When we started to hit the drug cartels, then the threat of linking drugs with the terrorist groups became less relevant for political purposes.
Thank you. We'll take another round of questions. Please keep it short. And I think it was a gentleman at the back. The one directly in front of me there. White shirt, yes.
Allô. Bonjour, Mortal Gay, je suis journaliste à l'Observateur. Mais c'est bon. Mortal Gay, je suis journaliste à l'Observateur. Le ministre des Forces armées du Sénégal a fait hier une révélation.
Made a revelation to say that Senegal has become indeed a turnaround point in the trafficking of drugs, a hub. And can you confirm that Senegal has become a hub in the drug trafficking? Merci.
Voilà, bien le bonjour à tout le monde. Moi, c'est Amadou Tidjanso. Je suis...
Good morning, everyone. Amadou Tidjanso, Chief Data, 3WF. My question is directed to President Pedro Pires. We know that Cape Verde, from a societal point of view, is making a great deal of effort on the management of water. Is it the same as far as drug is concerned? Of course, President Pires has understood your question. Then the lady here on the left.
From which?
Iran? You're in the
Iran.
UN
Okay,
press.
good, yes.
how realistic is it to expect West African countries, given their limited resources in their health clinics, a lot of them lack water, electricity, basic medications, manpower, how realistic now is it to ask them to also provide help for drug addicts?
Puisque le président Pires avait indiqué sa compréhension du deuxième question, je vais lui demander tout de suite de répondre.
Merci.
I must say that traffickers move about. They are not settled down in one country. When they are being hunted down, they move to another country looking for other havens and more secure places. Clearly, this is what is taking place right now in West Africa. But as regards my country, you see, we are islands and a few islands more. It's very difficult to control the coastline of our country. We have 2,000 kilometers of coastline. Each island has their own perimeter. You see that it's no easy task. You cannot warrant that we be in a position to fight with total efficiency narco traffickers. Anyhow, at home we have made efforts, because before you could catch the narco traffickers, but they would remain in their fortune, they would remain with their money. We have changed the legislation, and a narco trafficker who's criminalized loses their whole fortune, their whole money at a go. This is the most efficient action to fight narco traffickers. Anyhow, what I can say is that it's not easy to eliminate them, but we are indeed making laudable an effort to fight them. You can't compare that with water, because water is life and drug is not life. Anyhow, we are making efforts. We are continuing to walk the extra mile. Now, what we expect right now, I'm not in the government anymore, but we have embarked on a cooperation between various departments and the states of Africa in this front against narco traffickers. Aside from that, we have at home, how shall I put it, we have cooperation with many countries, taking account of the fact that we are also in the Atlantic Ocean. We need vessels, we need speedboats to fight them. This is the work being done by ourselves, but concomitantly we cooperate with other departments and services. Je me demande who says that the Minister of the Armed Forces of Senegal has declared that Senegal was a hub of drug trafficking. Well, if the Minister of the Armed Forces declares so, it is because he has the sound data to say so, and undoubtedly good statistics, and eventually sound information that enable him to be indeed alarmed on this issue obtaining here in Senegal. Now the Commission has fielded a mission here to Senegal. The Commission has had a report drafted on the situation obtaining in Senegal. Clear it is that Senegal is not the only hub of drug trafficking in West Africa. There are other countries that have a worse repute, perhaps, with respect to this business. But what is sure is that Senegal is one of the countries where, rightly so, the alternative measures which we are advocating to establish some sort of a solution to this problem, Senegal is one of those countries where these alternative solutions are being practiced. Hence, do we nurture hope? We nurture hope, and we will manage to curtail this matter anyhow. Now, with respect to the question which consists in asking whether our Commission has any other proposal for the countries that are less endowed, those having less water, or lacking this or that, the Commission is to deal with the issue of drug first and foremost. It is one of the plagues which is actually ailing our continent and which must solve in one way or another. We have other problems we're grappling with in Africa, the issue of development, the issue of infrastructures, logistics, environment, agriculture, you name it. We have problems on many fronts. The Commission has dealt with this problem and intends making an appeal to the international community, first of all to African policymakers, so that together we manage curtailing this plague. As President Obasanjo said, this is not what would be best to see a child coming out of the bush end up in jail because they found on him 10 grams of such a narcotic. The mission of the Commission was clearly delineated and underlined not only by the Secretary General Kofi Annan but also by President Olusegun Obasanjo. And if the Commission managed making a major step forward in this field, this would be quite useful an endeavor. This is what I can say very quickly. Le Président Obasanjo.
As a way of doing nothing about this, you say, is it realistic to say because of the situation and the needs and the competing and at times conflicting needs in development, social, economic in our countries, can we expect some resources to be made available for the health aspect of drug? My answer is yes, we can. Already, what it's being spent by either neglecting them, letting them rot away, or by putting them in jail, if you actually organize and give them and treat them like as part of public health issue, the amount of money, additional fund that you will need will not be that great. So my belief is yes, it will be very, very realistic that the issue of petty drug consumer, whose background, when you look at it, also the state can be held partly responsible. And if the state has to help in dealing with it, rehabilitating him humanely, and getting him back into becoming a productive member of the society, then it will be money well looked for and well spent, and we can realistically find it.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais aussi demander à
Kafonde, can you talk about this issue? But there is another issue that has been neglected. How can we help grassroots organizations? Also, allow me to say that Mrs. Kafondo has been awarded an international prize, the CIDA action by the Pierre Berger Foundation in Paris. Congratulations, Madam Mrs. Kafondo.
La commission a été mise en place. Et c'est vrai que la commission ouest-africaine, la Fondation Kofi Annan,
I've already responded to some of your questions. The Kofi Annan Foundation is not here to mobilize resources. We have already given you the missions of the foundation in West Africa. And this is civil society represented in the foundation, and the civil society should review this issue and see what it can do to resolve this scourge. It is not always political leaders who have started actions at the grassroots level. Take the example of HIV who mobilized, who triggered action before the political decision makers followed suit. Therefore, I would like to commend the actions of the Jacques Chirac Foundation and in the prevention activities of the Global Fund. They have received assistance, but the civil society should play its role. We have invited you people from the civil society to sensitize you, but we must tell you that we don't have money to give. You should raise the alarm at social and economic level, at security level. Therefore, I urge the civil society organizations to work with the politicians. In so doing, they will be involved in every decision-making policy. Don't wait. Don't expect the Kofi Annan Foundation to be the driving engine. You should collect information. You should sensitize the president of your republic. You should sensitize the foundations like the Kofi Annan Foundation, the Jacques Chirac Foundation. Then we will advocate at international level. And who are the most vulnerable populations? If you don't do anything for these vulnerable populations, nobody will do. We should say stop, we should act, we should forge ahead and call the attention of political decision makers. Take the case of HIV. We are all infected. If you are not a consumer of drugs, one of your kids or relative is a drug user. Therefore, we should have an important role to play as individuals, members of the civil society. You should get organized to put pressure on your governments and on institutions that have resources to assist. Take the case of HIV/AIDS. I was then Secretary General of the United Nations, and we put in place the Global Fund, but without the support of the civil society organization, nothing would have been possible. Therefore, we have to work hand in hand with the civil society. Just one or two questions before we call it a day. Gentleman in front of me, and then the lady in white.
Question is to Mr. Annan.
Tell us who you are.
Pardon?
Your organization.
Okay, my name is Pam Genjuf at Upper News. So it's clear that there have been many debates on and conferences on drug trafficking in West Africa. So what can you tell us is achievement by this region, I mean the West African region so far? And what do you think is the best mechanism to stem the issue? Thank you.
Question? No. I didn't get the question, if I can ask you.
So I say there have been many debates and conferences on drug trafficking in West Africa. So what are the achievements so far by the region in this field? And what do you think is the best mechanism to stem the issue now? Thank you.
Thank you, and then the lady here to the left. And then we'll have to close, I'm afraid.
Oui, bonjour, Karine Franck de RFI. Une question pour Kofi Annan, avec si vous pouviez répondre en français. Est-ce que cette dépénalisation ou décriminalisation ne risque...
Decriminalizing and depenalizing. Don't you think that it will not be accepted by public opinions in Africa? Don't you think that they will think that it is a license to use drugs? Mr. Annan and Oded, it's not an easy question. I know that some will not be happy with decriminalization of drugs, because these people would think that we would encourage people to use more drugs. But with the explanations that have been given, if people read and understand this report, they will understand that we are not encouraging drug use. It's for this reason that here and elsewhere, politicians do not want to tackle the issue. Only very few politicians dare say that we have said dare do what they did in Guatemala and Latin America. For example, how can you explain to a mother whose 18 or 20-year-old son has been caught with drugs for personal use? This drug was not for sale. So this kid is taken and jailed for 2 years. Can you explain to her mom that we are assisting her son? You should also understand that in some countries, governments spend more money in prisons than in school infrastructure, and this is not logical. En ce qui concerne le trafic,
we make some recommendations in our report, but I think one of the most difficult things is to try to fight corruption. Because if the institutions you are going to use to fight the drugs are corrupt and you allow it to remain corrupt, the fight becomes even tougher. And this has been done. Other societies have been able to clean up institutions or made it less corrupt so that they can do the work they are supposed to do. It is also important that the West African governments cooperate, share information, ensure that their territories are not used freely for drug trafficking, and they should do whatever they can to stem the drug trade and to disrupt the activities of these drug leaders. As President Obasanjo said this morning, we need to work together. It requires cooperation to be able to defeat them. We also need to monitor our banking systems to ensure that you don't have easy and free money laundering, which facilitates the work of these criminal organizations. These are some of the things that can be done. Thank you.
President Obasanjo.
Is that where attempts have been made to try what we are recommending in our report, the result has been that not everybody then rushes to become a drug addict. If anything, the number of people who get into drug has been reduced. And I think that is very important. That is very important. Then let me also underline my own experience in prison. Fortunately, except the foreign minister of Guatemala, nobody can share that experience with me on this high table. I met a young man who was enticed by his classmate, one of his, to get a rap of drug, and he was caught. And then he was put in jail for 5 years. By the time I met him in Yola prison, he has become a drug addict because the warders, the prison officials, trade in drugs with the prisoners almost openly. And this young man, I don't know, unless you really have a very, very serious rehabilitation program for him, maybe he's gone forever. Whereas if in the first instance, instead of sending him to prison, you send him to a rehabilitation center where he could get wind, and he hadn't really become a drug user, so to say, maybe it will have been a different case, a different situation.
Criminaliser l'usager de la drogue.
Why?
Je vois pas, il n'y a pas de raison.
There's no reason, because how can you, in actual fact, punish as a person who's a victim? Should you punish, condemn the victim, and victimize him even further? I don't see why. Secondly, at home in Cape Verde, you have a law that says the user must be condemned 1 month, the drug user. But given that I never saw a user jailed in Cape Verde, I asked, do you have that law? Well, then why don't you apply it? They told me it is not applicable. It's not enforceable. You see where the problem lies. I do not understand those who defend the idea of a criminalization or penalization of the users. But in Cape Verde, alcoholism is doing a lot more harm than drugs. But I'm not defending drug consumption, far from it. Anyhow, we have drinks for all tastes. We have drinks for all tastes, the sophisticated, the less sophisticated, and so forth. But in Cape Verde, quite frankly, it is alcoholism, drinking, that has very serious an effect on the health of our populations. We are trying to see how to curtail alcohol consumption in Cape Verde. On the one hand, you have drugs, but on the other, you have alcoholism. Aside from that, there's a debate right now in South America and Central America on light drugs. Soft drugs. There is an experience in Uruguay, but there are research being carried out. One should not take quite strict and stringent a position. One should try and find solution that would be more humane, more balanced for a situation of victim that is the user, the end user. I thank you.
To our special guest, Fernando Carrera. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to round up, I'm sorry I'm going to express this in English, but round up the idea. The promise of prohibition is that our young people were going to be protected from drugs. That was the promise. That by prohibiting all drugs, we were going to have a safe people, safe young people, separated from drugs. The reality is that drugs are taken by young people, but through illegal means, okay? And they are put in jail. Okay? That is a real fact. So one cannot confuse what is the promise and what is the reality. Okay? The other thing is that the country of prohibition is not liberalization. It's not that young people will find drugs everywhere whenever they want. That's not the country. Okay? The country is somehow a regulation of that consumption. as we do more with tobacco products, actually, than what we do with alcohol. With alcohol, we are quite lenient in accepting things, okay? And one of the reasons why alcoholism is so great in the world, not just in some countries, but everywhere, is because we are very capable of accepting alcohol consumption as normal. And seeing young people of weekend, completely alcoholized by what they have taken. And we consider that normal, even cultural sometimes, okay? But that shouldn't be. We should treat alcohol as we treat tobacco, okay? As something wrong, okay? But not because we believe tobacco is wrong for human health. We prohibit tobacco. What we do is we regulate tobacco. We regulate it heavily. We put taxes to tobacco, okay? We make campaigns, public health campaigns against tobacco. We inform citizens about tobacco's damages, okay? We prohibit it to be smoking in this room, okay? So we do many things to regulate tobacco. We should do the same with any drugs, and particularly with alcohol, okay? So I think the question is that sometimes we confuse what was the intention with what is the fact today. And what we have to realize is that with the facts we have today, we know the prohibition has failed.
Thank you all very much for joining us. I would just say, please do read the report. Several of the questions that were posed today, you really will find answers in this report. So please take copies. There are plenty here. Thank you, and thank you to all the panelists. Thank you.